Betfair trading is hard. If you're not endlessly refreshing the odds or staring at charts, you're spending hours in front of the screen crunching and analysing data, piecing together an edge. But every so often an opportunity will present itself that's so simple and easy to identify that you can't believe your luck. We are only 4 games into the Premier League, but I suspect the easiest trade of the season has already taken place. The trade netted me £60 worth of profit at very low risk from the top 4 market in the Premier League, and my only regret now is I didn't hit the opportunity harder to make even more money. You may have missed the great trade that I'm going to analyse in this video, but by watching to the end, I will reveal all of the steps that you need to know to never miss a trading opportunity like this again. The story of this trade began on the 15th of June, a full 57 days before the first ball of the Premier League season was kicked. Why was this date so important? This date was the day that the Premier League fixtures for the upcoming season were released. To know why the release of the fixtures was so pivotal for making £60 worth of profit from this trade, we need to know a crucial difference between value betting and Betfair trading. This opportunity would be impossible for someone who is value betting, but really easy for anyone who is Betfair trading. To value bet, one needs to know the probability of a selection winning by the end of an event. In the Premier League top 4 market, for example, a value bettor must calculate the probability that a team will finish in the top 4, convert that probability to odds, and if the calculated odds are bigger than the current real odds, congratulations, you have yourself a value bet. However, modelling the top 4 odds in this manner can be very difficult to do because of the uncertainty the further into the future you're trying to project. But this modelling approach is a completely valid thing to do. However, for this trading opportunity, it wasn't necessary to model who's going to finish in the top 4 because for us it doesn't matter who will finish in the top 4. As a trader, it's much easier to predict which way the odds are likely to move over a short period of time rather than the entire season. And on the 15th of June, the release of the Premier League fixture list was an excellent time to predict how the market was likely to move, specifically at the start of the season. On the release of the fixtures, no team is going to come out with an advantage against the other teams, as each team is going to play each other twice. So there won't be any impact on any of the team's chances of finishing in the top 4 based on the release of the fixtures. But there is a massive advantage for us traders because we can exploit the likely movement in odds given a team's start to the season. But how do we do that, you may ask? Well, it's actually as simple as you probably think. Any team that starts the season with an easy set of fixtures has a greater chance to pick up more points if that same team started the season with a set of really difficult fixtures. Imagine a team's first 5 fixtures were these. You don't need to be much of a genius to work out that this team is not likely to amass as many points as they would do if they started the season with these 5 fixtures. Ultimately, by the end of the season, it won't impact on any of the team's top 4 chances, no matter how difficult or easy the starts of the season they have. Because over the course of the season, the difficult runs of fixtures are going to be balanced out by the easier runs of fixtures, so there's going to be no impact on the overall chance of finishing in the top 4. So there is no value betting opportunity based on the release of the fixtures. However, from a Betfair trading perspective, any team that has a difficult start to the season in terms of their fixtures is more likely to drop points, and consequently, their top 4 odds are more likely to drift at the start of the season. The team in question for this trade is Newcastle. Newcastle finished 4th in the Premier League last season, and for that reason the market viewed them fairly favourably for a top 4 finish, having them as 5th favourites at odds of 2.68. I'm not really sure, or to be honest really care, if these odds represented the true chance of Newcastle finishing in the top 4. However, what was immediately obvious was that Newcastle's fixtures showed that they had an incredibly difficult start to the season. Newcastle were set to play Villa at home, then Man City away, Liverpool at home, Brighton away, and finishing at home to Brentford. How difficult a set of fixtures was this? Well, pretty much no matter how you analyse this situation, you could find that Newcastle had the most difficult start to the season of all the teams in the Premier League. They didn't just have the most difficult start, they had the most difficult start by some distance too. The very basic logic for this trade is that if Newcastle play to the level they are expected to play at, then after those 5 games, they will pick up less points on average, and the people in the betting markets will react to this, and the odds for Newcastle to finish in the top 4 will drift outwards from their price, currently at 2.68. Having the most difficult opening 5 fixtures in the league might be sufficient evidence for most people to justify placing a lay bet on Newcastle finishing in the top 4. However, there is actually even more evidence that puts the cherry on top of this metaphorical cake of this being the easiest trade of the season. And to know what that is, we next need to analyse the rivals for Newcastle for finishing in the top 4. I could have spent ages analysing each of Newcastle's rivals, but within hours of the fixtures being released, resources such as The Athletic and Opta will have already posted the analysis of the fixtures online, so there was basically no need to do this work myself. When looking at Newcastle's likely top 4 rivals, 4 of them in Chelsea, Man City, Spurs and Arsenal made up 4 of the 5 teams with the easiest starts to the season. Liverpool's start was a bit more difficult than those 4 teams, but was still way easier than Newcastle's start. A couple of the outside chances for top 4 in Brighton and Aston Villa were also in the top 9 teams for the easiest starts to the season. The only notable, genuine top 4 rival who had also a difficult start was Manchester United. The takeaway from this is that the expected number of points per game that Newcastle's rivals will get in their first 5 games is higher than what their average points per game will be by the end of the season, because they're playing their easiest fixtures first. And on the other hand, Newcastle have a much lower expected points per game from their first 5 matches than what their average points are likely to be per game by the end of the season, because they have such difficult fixtures to start with. These 2 things are working hand in hand to create the perfect trading opportunity of laying Newcastle to finish in the top 4 before the season started, and then backing Newcastle after the first 5 games, with the most likely outcome being that Newcastle would end up with a lower than average number of points after the first 5 games, and Newcastle's rivals for the top 4 would end up with a higher than average number of points after the first 5 games. People in the markets would look at this, see such a big difference in the number of points between Newcastle and their rivals, and begin to lay them in the top 4 market, and the odds would drift out, creating that profitable opportunity for us. Obviously, across the season, Newcastle are going to have periods of easier fixtures, and their rivals are going to have harder fixtures. And this is where Newcastle will claw back those expected points, and may or may not end up in the top 4 at the end of the season. But at this point, I will have long cashed out of my position because I'm only interested in the start of the season. I could go into detail on how to perform a more sophisticated analysis of this situation to calculate the expected number of points Newcastle and their rivals were expected to get after their first 5 games. But to be honest, when the situation is so blatant and obvious like this, there's no need to go into that level of detail. It's just as simple as it seems. So on to Betfair now. I got into this trade with a lay bet at odds of 2.68. I used a stake of £200, which gave me a liability of £340. In hindsight, I do wish I staked a little bit higher here, but these outright markets aren't the most liquid in all honesty, so I don't mind it too much. And if everything went as expected, the plan was to cash out by backing Newcastle after the first 5 games to guarantee a profit no matter where Newcastle finished in the league by the end of the season. This is a low risk position, but as with any trade, things can of course go against it. Specifically, Newcastle could considerably overachieve across these first 5 fixtures, and all of their top 4 rivals significantly underachieve across their 5 comparatively easier fixtures. But on the balance of probability, there's only a low chance of something like this happening. And even in this worst case scenario, just how short could these top 4 odds for Newcastle really go? I mean, after 5 games, there'd still be 33 games left of the season. That's a long way in the season to go. So Newcastle's odds aren't going to come in too short, even if things go very much against me than what is the likely outcome. So my loss won't be too excessive should it happen. So the plan was to cash out of this trade after the first 5 games, but anytime you're doing something like this, it's very important to keep track of the odds throughout the duration of your trade to make sure that nothing crazy or unexpected has happened. And I want to make sure that I'm watching, so if anything does happen, I can exit the trade earlier than anticipated. It's fair to say that when the season started, things didn't go exactly to plan. Newcastle beat Aston Villa in their first game 5-1, which caused, to me, a rather unexpected massive overreaction in the market. The The price for a top 4 finish came in all the way to evens, but I had no reason to panic, as this Villa game was either the easiest or second easiest fixture of the first 5. The other one would be Brentford maybe. So I was somewhat anticipating that this would be one of the games that Newcastle were likely to win. On to the second game now, which is against Man City. And a little side point I want to make about this game was that this is one of the craziest mispricings I've seen on a game for quite some time. Man City were unthinkably good value in this game at odds of 1.87, with Newcastle priced as short as 4.6. To show you just how crazy short Newcastle were priced in this game, the odds were implying that Man City were almost 10% less likely to beat this team than they were to beat Real Madrid, Arsenal and Bayern Munich last season, which is as ridiculous as it sounds and a huge value bet for Man City, as Newcastle are worse than these 3 teams. Anyway, tangent over, Newcastle lost this game. They also went on to blow up against 10-man Liverpool to lose back-to-back games. The 4th game was against Brighton, and Brighton did what Brighton do and raced into a 3-0 lead by the 70th minute. This is where I saw an opportunity to exit out of the trade earlier than initially planned. My hope that people would see this game, see that it was 3-0, and begin to overreact too much in the drift of Newcastle's odds. I also knew that the day after this game, Arsenal were playing Manchester United, so at least one of them teams was going to drop points, which would also benefit Newcastle's chances for a top 4 finish. So I took this opportunity to cash out of the trade by backing Newcastle at odds of 3.9, which left me with a guaranteed profit of £60, which seemed like a good decision as the game finished 3-1 and the odds for a Newcastle top 4 finish came back in to odds of just over 3. This trade went pretty much more or less as I expected it to do so. The odds did move against me after Newcastle beat Aston Villa, but after that the odds moved in the way that we anticipated. Newcastle dropped points in the games they were expected to drop points in, and the odds for them to finish in the top 4 drifted. Sometimes Betfair trading can just be that easy. Thank you for the Patreons who are supporting the channel. There's a link in the description below if you want to check out what perks you can get for supporting me on Patreon. And if you've got this far through the video, it probably means that you've liked it. And if you've liked this video, there's a very good chance you'll find this video enjoyable too. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.